Okay, so shall we make a start?
Absolutely, and those that don't show up will just miss all the secrets.
Oh. I just know you so well as Freyja and Ran. You're going to have to remind me of your real life names when you talk.
We will.
Okay. So, hello everyone. Welcome to this special talk. We have two special guests. We have Freyja Nemeth and Ran Garrigus, who in real life are the founders and co-owners of Westeros.org, which is the vast series of wiki and forum that for Game of Thrones, which they set up in 1997 when the book series was just getting off the ground, really, I guess. And they have run the fan site ever since, as it became such a huge worldwide phenomenon with the Game of Thrones TV series. And they're here today to talk about what it's like to create a site like Westeros.org and then maintain it through the last nearly 25 years.
Yes. Oh God, it makes me feel terribly old. Well, thank you,
Saffia. Take it away.
Yes, thank you for having us back here again. We started off coming here to talk about the World of Ice and Fire, the book that we had the fortune of co-creating with George R. R. Martin under our real life names, Ling Antonsson and Elio Garcia. And Saffia keeps insisting that we come back, and we like it so much at the Fantasy Fair, so of course we do. And I thought we'd talk a little bit this year about how we ended up in the situation, really, because it all has to do with us starting that website way back in the dark ages of the internet. We were both on the internet fairly early, ran even earlier than me, and when we met in 1995, it was on a Tolkien role-playing game. So I was a big fantasy reader. Elio was a big reader in general, and I got him into A Song of Ice and Fire. The first book was out then, A Game of Thrones. The second book, A Clash of Kings, will be coming out in a couple of years. And we got really into it, and when our first thoughts about starting the site was not really this grand idea of being a resource for everything and everybody, but we had the plans of creating our own role-playing game, and that's how our initial contact with George went, that we asked him permission to create this role-playing game. And we wanted to then create resources for our future players. And in that, we were inspired by what we had seen from partially the Tolkien community around that role-playing game, and also the communities around a couple of Wheel of Time role-playing games. So we knew what people wanted to see. For example, collecting information about the world. That became the start of our concordance, which basically just collects details of what people wear, what people eat, religions, places, all of that. Nothing about the story, just the world that the characters inhabit. And from being inspired, I'd say, not so much the Tolkien fandom, but the fact that there existed collections of, Tolkien's letters. We thought that, well, George is online and he's answering questions in email for people, and he's doing the occasional chat online. Somebody should collect what he says so that it isn't lost for posterity, given that there's not going to be any physical copies of these of these letters or anything. So that's when he got his permission to start the So Spake Martin collection, to collect anything that people forwarded us about answers that he'd given to questions. And then we had our own little special interest in the whole thing, which was the fact that we thought that the heraldry that he had created for Westeros was really cool. And while I'm by no means an artist, I like to play around in Paint Shop Pro and started making the house sigils. So we said, I think that was the first thing we actually put up on the web, was the house sigils. The concordance was a Word doc, and the So Spake Martin collection was also a Word doc initially. And we started out off on a free web server, putting up a heraldry and showing it to George and then showing it to other fans and so on. And it started slowly growing from there. There was already something of a community starting to gather on basically one message board, or maybe a couple message boards. And early days of the internet, those message boards would die with some regularity and move on to another one, and people would follow along. So the site grew on the side, and the message board and its community grew slowly on the side, and we weren't running the board in those early days. But eventually one of the maintainers moved on in life, moved on to med school, I think, and asked the running of the forum to Ran. So we kind of slowly folded that into Westeros, which in 1998 we registered a domain and started making the proper site, figuring out how to code a website. Back in the days, there were not that many templates, and there weren't any WordPress sites that you could just push a button and put everything up. You had to do it all on your own, and it turned out all right. Not always great. Somebody who shall not be named, but might have been called Linda, thought that a really dark site looked very cool. Might not have been the most readable in the world, but it looked cool. Dragons, Targaryen colors, all of that. Those juvenile mistakes one makes. So the site kept growing, community around it. Eventually the forum got folded in fully onto the Westeros.org domain. And I guess it was somebody on, I think it was one of our members, correct me if I'm wrong, one of our members that suggested that we have a wiki, right?
Yeah, that's right. Somebody actually suggested to us, because Wikipedia was actually removing pages people had created on Wikipedia for Song of Ice and Fire. They were trying to get rid of what they called fan cruft, and they thought, nobody needs a page on, Sansa Stark or the Hound and so on. So we got convinced to start our own wiki to just save all those pages and allow fans to have a place for it. Now I think Wikipedia has changed its opinion on that, but our wiki is still extremely popular because we were basically the first dedicated wiki for A Song of Ice and Fire.
So a lot of the details are sort of you could say grew organically. What ended up being a part of the site. I think if we had sat down to plan what we wanted, it would have been very different. Is my voice going out now? Okay, just making sure. Sorry, I didn't push the wrong button again. I can never quite see. Anyway, so we added these elements slowly over time, and the forum, it grew from, I think when we started, we had a few thousand members, and then closer on, as the series started taking off in book form, we were up around 16,000 members. And then, of course, this little thing called Game of Thrones happened, and overnight after the first episode, we had so many people visiting after that first episode that we turned off viewing on the forum for guests because we couldn't keep the server up. So we made it so that people had to register. Unfortunately, almost all those people, or very many of those people who wanted to read the forum did register that first day. And we had manual approval of all new accounts, which means that it was a busy day afterwards trying to approve all of those accounts. So the forum grew, I think, very rapidly with tens of thousands of members, and the community as a whole exploded and really changed the playing field for running a site. Those sites that started early on in late 90s and onwards, fan sites for not just, A Song of Ice and Fire, but other things, they grew before the advent of real social media, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, what have you. These were not things that one considered when you made a site at the time. A website was a website, and then, yes, you could have a forum, and then wikis. Those were the three big pillars that we ended up using. But by the time that Game of Thrones arrived on the scene as a TV show, there were so many other outlets that people could use to form communities on. So we rapidly found that it wasn't possible any longer to be the one site for everybody. People wanted to focus on different aspects of the series, different ways of interacting with the material. So you had other sites coming up. You had Tumblr becoming quite big in the fandom, where some groups of fans would find that was much more to their liking. The way that you would share material, the way you would talk about it on Tumblr. I don't think Facebook was ever, there were some Facebook groups, but that was never such a big part. There were lots of people on Twitter as well. I know that obviously for the direct commentary with the episodes, that was quite popular. I've seen people with various role-playing accounts on Twitter and so on. So it spread and became much too large for anyone to overview. We were for a while running a web ring back when these things still existed, and held on to it for quite a while, trying to lead people to various, particularly non-English speaking sites, because Westeros Rogue was, before the show started, Westeros Rogue was big enough that other English speaking sites didn't really take off unless they were very niche sites. But then we did start seeing a lot of international fandom, and we liked being able to connect with the internet. So that's why we had a web ring, and people actually liked that for a long while in the international sites, but I think now people have moved on to using podcasts, YouTube, and all these other ways of having little communities that share material amongst themselves. So that's a little bit about what our journey has been like, and figured I'd tie that in a little more as I speak about what you might think about if you want to get into having a fan site or a fan community today, because it is a very different game to start up today. I think the idea of creating the one site to bring them all together is going to be very difficult. Obviously, many authors today are established on the internet. George was on the internet, but he was mainly using his AOL account to bid on miniatures on eBay, I think, was his main interest, and a couple of chats on I think sff.net that had some author chats and so on, and news groups. So he wasn't exactly, and one can't say that he still is particularly internet savvy. He still likes to write on his old DOS computer. But obviously younger authors who are coming out with book series today may very well already have their own internet presence. In fact, publishers are very, very happy and very strongly encourage authors to have a good internet presence so that they have to do less of the market and the authors do it themselves by being active on Twitter and various other platforms. So you come in essentially or potentially competing for the audience with the author themselves, and then you'll have to look at what can you offer that isn't straight from the horse's mouth. In some cases, the authors might be interested in collaborating on having fans running a forum for them. I mean, authors should be writing and not running forums. If they get too involved, I think if they have been on the internet already, they're all going to be very well aware of how much of a time sink it can be. Are probably happy to have connections with reliable fans who might run parts of their communities. Most authors probably won't have the time to create their own wikis, even if some of them do use wikis as writing aids and as sort of internal wikis that they use for structuring their world building, or if they're collaborating with somebody else. But that's not going to be material that gets put straight on the internet generally. So it's a matter of looking at what's already out there. Is it already established in some way, this fandom? Should you go entirely as an independent community, or looking at working with an author if they're interested in most of them are, you know, very happy about having fans and having fans talk about them online, because that, you know, word of mouth is what sells books a lot of the time. But they might still not feel comfortable about being directly involved. If there's a forum, for example, I know that George has always said that he doesn't want to go on the online forums and read things. He used to do in the beginning. He said that a couple of times he'd look at forums early on. Obviously, you know, it's really cool to see people talking about your books. But there's always the concern, what if somebody has sold one of my mysteries in the books and they write about it on this forum? And I read that, and then I go, oh no, now I can't do that in the book. So he thought it was too dangerous. The temptation was too big of seeing what people are saying and trying to outsmart fans. So he stepped away from that and reads, as far as I know, very little of anything that's said online. And I would suspect that most authors, if they don't feel like that from the get-go, they probably come to feel like that fairly quickly. If it is an established fandom, I think you could always try and find your own niche within the fandom. There are so many ways of interacting with a series of books. You might be able to find something that you have a special interest in. We have, obviously, the larger the fan base is, the more easier it is to be very niched. But we have people doing podcasts on A Song of Ice and Fire and military history. We've had A Song of Ice and Fire and costuming, and there's a couple of women who ended up publishing. They started a blog where they did recipes from the books that George had described, and then they tried to find medieval recipes that would more or less fit what he described, and then cook them and, you know, sort of modernize them and make them so that people could try them themselves. And they ended up publishing a book eventually with, you know, with an actual publisher and so on. There was so much interest around it, so that people, you taking your special interest and applying it to the world of Westeros, other people want to see that as well. So if you have a lot of interest in something, there's always going to be that where you can be really niched and go in and find some your talents, and you can talk about it. I mean, we see so many different podcasts analyzing things from different angles, and YouTube channels going over things from different angles. But it's very cool when people bring their various skills to the table like that. So even if you have a very large fandom already, there's always something that someone hasn't done. And if it's new, on the other hand, if the books have just come out and you absolutely love them and you want to tell the whole world about it, think about how you like to do it. Do you like to write something? As in, maybe you should start a blog and allow comments if you like to write analysis of characters, of plot, and so on. Do you like to interact with people a lot? Well, maybe a forum where you can have other fans coming in and do so. But think about the moderation, because it can be a lot of work finding good moderators, doing all the moderating. That can be a lot of work. A blog can be easier in that sense. Or maybe you want to primarily use social media. So maybe you want to have it largely as Twitter commentary. Or maybe you want to go in with doing podcasts or live commentaries where people can interact with you and ask questions, something like that, or streams on YouTube. There's something for anyone who likes to reach out with a message today. There are so many different ways of doing it that most everyone should be able to find some way of sharing their love for an author and a series of books in a way that they feel comfortable with, and with just the right amount of interaction with other fans. And I think I'm going to leave over to Elio for a bit to talk perhaps a little bit about the running of forums and wikis as well, and some things to think about when you have larger communities like that.
Yes, it's been, certainly for us, it's been a learning process the entire time of running a forum in particular. When you have so many people from around the world, lots of different opinions, and then you have, in our, I think, a fairly unique case for us, which is the situation that a forum started when there were just the books, and there was just a book fandom, and then you had the TV show fandom, and it kind of, they paralleled one another for a while, and then as time went, they became more and more separated at some degree, because our forum of primarily book readers developed a general, it was more critical of a TV show as time passed compared to some websites that started or purely for a TV show. So people who were just fans of a TV show or became fans primarily because of the TV show eventually started migrating away. But in the period of time before that happened, you had a lot of tension. And our viewpoint is that we were going to stick to our rules, that people should stay civil to one another. People should try to have constructive discussions about what they liked and what they disliked without getting wound up about, oh, how dare you like this, or how dare you criticize that. Another thing I think that a lot of forums may try to do, in fact, I know of a forum that is being run specifically with an eye towards trying to keep the fandoms all on their website, is you could try and say, well, we're just a positive place, no criticism of anything. That is a perfectly valid way of doing it. It's not how we would choose to run something. We think that if you can't stand criticism, and if you can't take part in discussions with people about why you dislike something or why you like something, maybe a forum that's about discussion isn't really the right place for you. Maybe you want to go to a news site. Maybe you just want to go to a site that's posting memes, or you want to go to a site that is just really focused on the positive and the positive of the community. When it comes to something like a wiki, I mean, a wiki is it's a big task, especially the way we did it, because we are hosting the wiki ourselves. It's we downloaded Wikipedia from Wikimedia, and we run it entirely ourselves, entirely on our server. These days, there used to be what's Wikia, now it's called Fandom. Fandom makes it very easy for anyone to start a wiki for anything they want. And my caution with that is that I realized very quickly that Wikia and fandom depends very much on just the free labor of fans to make for profits. For a time, we were actually associated with fandom.com indirectly because we had advertising to support the cost of our website. And the vast majority of the traffic during the show was for the wiki. If we did not, and I mean, by vast, I mean tens and tens of terabytes of data each month, which was not cheap. And we needed to have the advertising to be able to support that. Fandom takes care of it for you, but fandom also means you have to follow the rules, you have to do things exactly how they want it. You can be kicked off of the wiki you founded if they decide that you're not doing a good enough job. There's a trade-off. Like, if you just want to have stuff out there for fans, I definitely would say look at fandom. If you really want to make sure that it's a vision that is for fans and by fans, it might be worth considering hosting your own wiki and going your own way. You won't have the presence necessarily to start with that fandom gives you. Fandom will, if it's a hot property like Game of Thrones became, they will push your site. They will send experts on their side to help you, develop it and so on. But they will start having more editorial control over what you do as well. They may push you to do things in a way that is search engine optimized. They may make sure that you leave lots of space for the kinds of ads they want to run. We, as you can tell, I think we have a fairly jaundiced opinion of fandom as because it is exploitive to a degree, and at the same time, like it's if people don't care and they just want the information out there, it works great. To go back to forums for a second, what I want to say about another aspect of forums is when they grow. Again, it's kind of like the whole thing about trying to keep people of this diverse fandom all together in one place. I think it's generally a mistake to try and do that. Our forum has, over its years, had a lot of what we call splinter forums. Little basically baby forums that grew out of subgroups that kind of said, oh, we don't like the way these discussions go here. There's too many people who don't want to discuss things the same way we do, so we're going to go and start our own forum. And I think actually that's a good thing. I think it's a great thing that people can vote with their feet, and I think there should be, the best forums probably do very little to try to cater to the idea of there is only one community and there can only be one community. So when, as Linda discussed, Tumblr and Facebook, there actually is a pretty big Facebook group, actually. Reddit, all of these things, it was great. I think it's great that people found different ways to express themselves, and I don't think there should be any need to feel like, oh, we have to bring those people back. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, it really doesn't. Because while you're trying to bring them back, what are you doing to the community that has stayed? Are you compromising what's there? So I really think that is a really important aspect of how things should be done. It should be done with an eye to consistency in your website and not being afraid to let groups just go if they want to go, and while welcoming those who do want to be there, who accept, like, this is the community I want to be part of, not I want to change the community to become more like what I want.
And I would say that no matter how you do run it, there's always going to be people who feel that when you've had a long-running forum, for example, it was better in the old days. Anything, it was better in the old days. That you're always saying that about something, and there's always someone saying that about something, and I'm not terribly fond of one. I'm one of those I don't like change. We don't do that in this house. So yeah, I get that feeling, but some of that growth is going to be organic, and you won't be able to force it to stay the same, because then you might choke it entirely. You will need to sort of follow along, just the right amount to allow the community to grow and change, but still, keeping certain frames there that you want to have in place. There are lots of long-running communities on the internet, and there are also some that they might grow over a brief period of time, and then there isn't that much to discuss any longer, and then people drift off to other things. One way of keeping people engaged in the long run is also allowing a certain amount of off-topic talk. Often, between books, and between books in A Song of Ice and Fire has turned out to be fairly long periods at times. We have had a lot of activity in our miscellaneous forum, in our general literature forum, for a while actually, before AMAs on Reddit became a big thing, and before more authors established their own online presences. We actually had quite a few authors posting on our site and talking to people there, because it was at the time a very good way of reaching a lot of fantasy fans and to talk about fantasy and science fiction. So you can always make sure to keep an active off-topic section where people can just talk, be themselves. People are essentially going to, grow up or grow older with a community. We've had people get married, and we've had a number of what we call board babies who have are now getting on in years. I'm not quite sure how old the oldest of our board babies is anymore.
I think he's just starting college now, I think.
That have like a home produced and fully originated in Westeros, basically. So that's when you have a long running community in that sense, you're going to get to know people outside of just the interests that you have in common, and there's always the opportunity to take it from the internet and have various real life meetups. Maybe not, the last 2 years, but sometime in the future we might be able to actually say hello to people again from less than 3 meters away, and then it might be nice to have some meetups again. We've had obviously groups that have gone to the various World Cons, the World Science Fiction and Fantasy Conventions, because in this case George tends to go to them, so fans have gathered at those and various other conventions. That's always a good way if you're having a genre community to try and get together at conventions and have your own little mini convention within the big convention, and meet up, talk, and that puts it's nice to put faces to the names and get something, get some connections to the community that way. But it can be really, really rewarding to, no matter how big or small that you want to make running a fan site and running a fan community, it can be a lot of work, but it can also be very rewarding, because you're likely to meet people that are going to become very important, even if you never meet them in real life, and even if they just stay on the internet. And obviously Second Life is an example of that as well. You have communities that have been going on for a long while within Second Life, got married and so on through Second Life, so it's all part of the bigger picture of what the internet has facilitated. And I think that I'm sure, rather, I'm not even thinking, I am sure that Saffia has some questions, because Saffia always has some questions, which we're very grateful for, because people can be very shy otherwise. So I think I'll let her butt in from now on, and we'll see what other little things we can branch out into from here.
Okay, yes, got my mic on. Giggling quietly at things you've been saying off them. So, I mean, you've really kept this going for nearly 25 years now, which is a phenomenal length of time.
Yeah,
I remember back in the day, I wasn't a member of the Game of Thrones community. I kind of was a member of a Babylon 5 community, and I was very impressed by the speed and the ease with which people kind of form themselves into communities. You were saying before the TV series started, you had about 15,000 members. What was the highest number you got to, and where is it about today?
Well, we haven't mostly purged members from the forum, so that membership kind of keeps growing, and but obviously not everyone is active. But I'm sending Elio off to check on our user statistics here, since the Envision Forum kindly provides a bit of a look at how many registrations we have. How many are we getting right now, by the way? We still seem to have a...
Over 100 per month right now.
Yeah, so forum adds around 100 a month, even now, when you're talking about a sort of in-between period. Obviously, people have started to expect that there will be news about the next book or about House of the Dragon, so that always increases interest.
143,465.
We've had in total 143,000 registrations now since we started the forum.
Wow.
Yeah, obviously, a lot of that is going to be dead accounts by now.
Yes.
And I would say that the vast majority of posting at the moment is on non-A Song of Ice and Fire, non-Game of Thrones topics, perhaps. But there's still people who go on discussing things that haven't been discussed for 20 years. There's always new people coming in, and
asking
wanting,
old questions.
yeah, asking old questions and getting into it for the first time. And there's always going to be their experience of it that they want to discuss and that they want to share. Obviously, people are still discussing and dissecting Lord of the Rings, even if the big sites that grew with the when the movies came out, like the OneRing.net, are not that active. I think it's because, in part, because those grew up around the movies, and that was more of their identity. That was harder for them to survive in the long run. Whereas sites that focus on books generally have, I think, a longer, a chance of lasting longer, unless something becomes a massive franchise of, Star Wars and Star Trek level. There, there aren't any books anyway, so that is kind of the source material, and there you can have these really long-running communities as well. But we see that the sites that started for the Game of Thrones TV show, some of those have dropped off the map pretty much entirely now that the TV show is done. And they didn't really convert into being book discussion sites.
Right. Right. I suppose, what if the next book comes out and is, for example, radically different from what happened in the TV series? That's going to start a whole new lot of speculation and...
Yes, it's going to be obviously an interesting experiment in that that's not a usual situation with the books coming out after the TV show. I think people expect that there will be quite a lot of changes, and for the forum, given us that we've had a core of book readers, or at the very least TV show watchers who then became book readers, perhaps prefer the book's TV show. A lot of people will probably be relieved with the changes, but it's certainly going to be a lot of speculation and comparison. There's one discussion that's going to come up is, did George change this because they did it this way in the TV show?
And there are also things that happen in the TV show which it would seem very difficult that he could actually move the books into alignment with the TV show. For example, the story arc of Sansa Stark, which is quite different.
Yes. No, I mean there are decisions where he has said that these things cannot happen in the books, or rather he would say that the TV show has gone in a direction that is very different from what I have planned, and they have they've killed certain characters that I've left alive. They've left alive characters that I've killed off. And he talked very early on about the effect of sort of the little, the ripples of the butterfly wings that just increase over time, the effect of it. And they cut out large storylines, and they're going to be in the books. So basically they knew the end stages for a lot of characters, but because they had changed the path there quite a lot, they would have gotten them to those end stages in very different ways.
Yeah.
So I think even if one believes that who is dead and who is alive at the end may be fairly accurate as to what George intends, how it happens is still, we feel is still a mystery that we're interested in experiencing. Others feel that no, I know the ending now, and that means I'm not interested in reading it. But yeah, I've always been the kind of person, or not always, but often, where I haven't been able to contain my nervousness about the fate of certain characters, where I end up going and reading the last pages of a book.
Yes.
Just to reassure myself.
Yeah.
And then, so knowing the ending, it depends on the type of reader you are. Sometimes it matters to you and it ruins the experience. Other times you care more about how people got to that ending.
I think that, yes, and it will be very interesting, I think, to actually find out the paths that they take.
Yes, no, it will be, and I always have one thinks about the angle of fan communities and so on. Now, we're seeing that, they're going ahead with House of the Dragon, which is based on book material, although not a novel per se, more, the fake history kind. So we don't know yet how much that will draw people to Westeros Rogue for their We know they're going to find the wiki when they do searches on the characters and so on. Will they be drawn to our forum to discuss it, or will there be a new crop of TV show forums specifically for House of the Dragon? Hard to say. Some of the sites that have stuck around are obviously going to cover House of the Dragon as well, and we're going to see. I suspect that, when it comes to TV shows and such right now, YouTube shows and after show podcasts are huge. So that's going to be a big part of the game as well. People have such incredibly professional setups from doing podcasts and YouTube videos from home these days. So it's just crazy, and that's one part where we've found it a little harder to keep up with. But we've done some videos, but it's you kind of have to be very dedicated to have the time for that.
One thing I was going to ask was, how long do you see this going on? How long do you think you two will be running this? Is it kind of like indefinitely, or do you feel that at some point you're going to have to call it a day?
Yeah, retirement.
Our plan is to keep doing it until we drop dead. Basically, we definitely need to keep the website running. We keep needing to have the community running. As long as people are interested, we will host it and we will run it, because it's a large part of our lives these past years, and we expect it to be a part of our lives for the future. I mean, there's not a day that goes by that we don't something about the books, the TV show, the website, the community isn't in our thoughts. So it's very important to us.
Something else that strikes me quite forcefully is that you have a community that is very kind of, how can I put it, balanced, in that your fans and you kind of communicate on a similar playing field.
I think, yeah, that's really true. We may be sort of first fans or something, but we are first among equals, I guess, in the sense that if I say something, if I put forward a stupid, point about something, or I make a mistake, people call me out. Oh no, you're right. I am not infallible. George isn't infallible. George himself, but we are a little bit proxies to George, in the sense that people, they can't get a hold of George, but they know that we talk to George and we've worked with him, so they'll ask our opinions, and we always say, like, we don't necessarily know anything more than you do, but here's my thoughts, or here's our views, because we have seen so many theories, so many discussions over the years, so we have that big base of in fact, just the other week we had a video chat with a group of fans from Italy, and we've never really interacted with the Italian fans, but we had seen their tweets and so on, and thought they seemed fun, and they seemed to be really interesting people. So I just kind of, when they made some remark, they tagged me in a tweet about something, and I just said, well, yeah, so when are you going to have us onto your vlog, your video, your Zoom thing? And they, oh my god, it was a huge thing. Like, they were so amazed that we were interested and we wanted to talk to them. And in the course of discussion, it was really interesting. We had them bringing up theories that were new to them, to their fandom. But, I said, like, oh yeah, I remember that theory because the first time I saw the theory was like 20 years ago on one of the first versions of our forum. On the other hand, they presented completely brand new theory that I've never thought about, which was a really interesting theory, and they were quite amazed and quite chuffed. In fact, yesterday they actually had another video Zoom thing just discussing their experience talking with us and discussing it with their fellow fans. So that was kind of neat.
Oh, that's great. No, but what I was thinking was that quite a lot of the way that some of the social media operates. It's very much a leader and followers. So with podcasts, you've got the person who makes the podcast, and sometimes you will get podcasts that reply to podcasts, but generally it's people commenting on the podcast and commenting on the comments on the podcast. So it kind of turns into a sort of pyramid, possibly quite a narrow pyramid model, whereas yours has this openness to people coming in at your level in a way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think that in that sense, the these days, you'd have to say an old school forum allows for a more level playing field, in that it isn't one person producing content and other people responding to it.
Yeah.
I mean, you can do both things when you're in a fandom. We've done both things because we have our YouTube videos and we have written articles on the site, and we write blog posts and we repost the blog posts to the site. But yes, the discussions that are more the community discussing within themselves allow everyone to have a voice. Which, it can be the problem with the forum, because there can be a lot of noise as well.
Yes.
There can be a high, the signal to noise ratio may not be the best, but it can also be a way of allowing a lot of people to express themselves, because they don't need to create their own platform to speak. They are on a platform that already allows them to speak, and I think it's necessary that we can't just have everyone sitting there and tweeting for themselves or just writing their blog for themselves. That can be a fun way of just getting your thoughts out there, but then it's not a dialogue. A forum is still one of the best ways to have a dialogue on the internet.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Well, if anyone in the audience has a question, now is your time to ask it. We have another event here in 1 minute's time, so we had probably better wrap this up rather rapidly. Does anyone have any questions? Or have we managed the wonderful task of getting all the questions answered?
We will assume that that's the case, and we certainly managed to time it very well. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you again, Saffia. You're very good at making sure it comes out just right.
Yes. Okay, well, thank you to my guests, Garrigus and Freyja Nemeth, and I love our chats. I just love your session every year. So
We do as well. It's
Yeah.
always wonderful to speak to you and speak here at the Fantasy Fair.
okay, and the live stream of this will actually be available.
Excellent. We will make sure to share that one. So out on our various social media. So thank you for having us, and thank you to the audience for showing up. It's been a pleasure as always.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. And see you soon. I'm going to jump down.
Yes. Whee!